Welcome to the Decent Crypto Podcast. Today is Monday, May 29th, and we are back. And Ethereum is dead, Matt. That's what we're here to talk about. How you doing?
Wait, what? Dude, even Ethereum Classic isn't dead.
Wait, what?
I guess I know which side of the debate I'm lining up on today.
Yeah.
So okay, maybe a bit of background. We were
I was going to
having beers.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were having beers a
I
few
was going to
days ago,
say,
and Karan said, "Matt, Ethereum is cooked." And I said, "What? What are you talking? What have you been smoking?" But he made some good points, and I thought it would be like a nice little like debate to have live on air for our listeners, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of things changing in the Ethereum ecosystem. There's a lot of value accruing where it never did before. There's value not accruing to places that we all thought it would. So let's hop in. What do you think? Why is Ethereum dead?
Yeah, well, yeah, first of all, I was going to say most people probably don't know that there's a debate happening. I think the debate is just between the two of us and now our whole listener base. So welcome, everybody, to the Is Ethereum Dead conversation. I don't know. I think there's a lot to touch on here. I think we have to start with Bitcoin. Right. I don't know what triggered all of this for me was Bitcoin and ordinals and BRC20s, and just playing around with what's happening in that ecosystem and seeing how much of really the value of what was happening on Ethereum and the value of some of the tokens that were created, how easy it was to replicate that on Bitcoin, and how little actual innovation has happened on ETH. Once you start using these other things, you start realizing that there's really not that much going on that can't be replicated in another environment that is not only longer lasting, which, Bitcoin, and but also more secure. If you look at proof of work is more secure, for many reasons. We can touch on those, but that's what started all of it for me. Is like, if you can have NFTs and you can have these shit coins and meme coins on Bitcoin, and you can do almost all of the same stuff that you could on Ethereum, at least all of the stuff that really became popular. There's a lot of stuff you can't do in terms of actually having smart contracts at the base layer, but in terms of usage and in terms of what people are actually using this stuff for, there's already more users and more holders on Bitcoin right now in terms of like active users than there are on Ethereum, like today. So yeah, like if you look at it that way, Ethereum is already cooked. It's already over. But I don't think it's over forever. I think that this is just the beginning. Like, Ethereum will come back, but that's what started the whole thing for me. I don't know. Like, is there like another starting point, or is that kind of the basis of this conversation for you too?
Yeah. It's basically about Bitcoin versus Ethereum, which is not a conversation I thought we would ever have.
Yeah.
Like
There's
that.
also a second layer. I don't know. There's also a second layer though, where it's like, I do think if you look at like the deep tech stuff and scalability and putting this stuff in the hands of a billion users eventually, which is the thesis that a lot of people talk about, Ethereum is behind in that race as well. Like, Solana is way ahead. If you look at a lot of different metrics, obviously it's way behind in TVL and market cap, but in terms of technology, I think that Ethereum is behind on that side as well. And we can get into that too, but I think there's kind of two things that make me think that Ethereum is cooked. So yeah, that's the two main kind of like talking points I have.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, like, in summary, basically, the idea is that ordinal sort of shows the start of the ability to have arbitrary, logic, or, not faltering completeness, but a lot of logic that unlocks a lot of use cases for Bitcoin, mostly speculation, right?
Yeah, at least
That have only been
arbitrary
available
forms
on
of
Ethereum.
data.
Yeah,
Yeah. Arbitrary forms of data, not necessarily arbitrary like logic, but arbitrary forms of data. Arbitrary, yeah, like any kind of data that can be stored on chain, which is a lot of what Ethereum was being used for.
yeah.
Kind of, tracking transfers of data. That's basically what a lot of these tokens are.
Yeah. So I think like when you think about Bitcoin as a data availability layer, right? You want to look at Ethereum as a data availability layer too. So the thing that I'm thinking of is okay, like in the Ethereum, scaling roadmap, right? You have all these layer twos and they write down data to the L1, and that sort of serves as a data availability layer where like people are incentivized to maintain copies of the data, but B, like a consensus layer too, right? Where like everybody in the network comes to consensus on what happened on these other chains by looking at which data was written by these chains to Ethereum, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the idea behind layer twos is like, what if we don't have like all the execution taking place on Ethereum? We just sort of maintain like track of like what of like the transaction and the state of the world, and like what's allowed to be withdrawn on Ethereum as like that kind of ultimate like value layer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's an interesting point, right? Which is like Bitcoin also offers this, right? It also offers a settlement layer, or sorry, a consensus layer. And with proof of work, it is a very strong consensus, right? Um, but it also allows for data availability. What it doesn't allow for is execution. So you almost have to compare it to something like a Celestia or something, which just sort of exists as like each block is sort of storing like whatever data, and whatever it means, however it's interpreted, that's sort of up to like the end user, right? So when you think about like power here, right? Like let's take BRC20 as an example. BRC20 isn't the only attempt to like create like a taproot script that like represents like fungible tokens, right? We have Taro. We talked about it on our deep dive. There's like one or two others that I've heard about. The nerds all tell me that they're more. Shout out to you, Sean. The nerd tells me that they're higher quality tech than BRC20s, which might be true, right? But what really matters here is a social consensus of like, are those BRC20s worth anything? And by far the cleanest, easiest way for them to be worth something is on a centralized exchange, right? Um, and so otherwise it's just bytes. It's just data available somewhere, and without like that sort, it's like headless data, right? Or brainless data, without having some kind of brain to like tell you what these bytes mean and pay you something in exchange for them. The whole thing is kind of moot, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like centralized exchanges really are sort of like the crux of like the power holders in all of this. And so if BRC20 see any value or not, that's going to be dictated by like, is Binance going to list them? Is like, are they going to be available on KuCoin? Eventually, is Coinbase going to do it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think there's part of it though that like we have to step back, right? And it's like, why are we talking about just tokens in the first place, right? Like Ethereum can do anything, right? It's Turing complete. You can literally have any kind of smart contract that allows for anything. Yet the number one use case that we've settled on is speculating, on these meme coins and these NFT projects that are essentially meme coins with like slight variations and traits and things like that. But they trade at the floor and they're essentially meme coins. So the thing is, like, I don't know, when you look at the large scale, like what's happening on Ethereum, sure, there's some interesting stuff. DeFi is a very important innovation, right? Like we talked about this offline, but lend, borrow, and then swap, those are very key primitives that are important to a decentralized financial ecosystem for sure. And you can't have that natively on Bitcoin as it stands right now. And so Ethereum stands out for that, no doubt. But if you look at what's happened with ordinals and BRC20, it basically, outside of those three key applications, ordinals and BRC20, they basically cover the rest of it, right? What are people doing? They're basically, what is the history of NFTs? You have these, cool little JPEGs, and you build a community around them. You build a Discord that's token gated where everybody can talk and interact and, become friends. And then I don't know, you proliferate those pictures, you share them, and you create more of them on chain. You create more kind of, shared kind of, data stores on the blockchain. And that's exactly all the stuff that you can do on Bitcoin now. With meme coins as well, right? There's like one shared story, everybody rallies around it, and they, either they're behind it or they're not behind it. And it's just a representation of how people want to act in the market on chain. That you can do that on Bitcoin now. So, outside of a couple key primitives, DeFi primitives, like, I don't know what else is really happening on Ethereum that you can't do now on Bitcoin. And then if you talk specifically about DeFi, and we can go deep into exactly what DeFi is and what assets really matter on DeFi, Ethereum is not the chain that you want to have true DeFi on, if you ask me. So I just don't really see a narrative for ETH, the token, right now, except for the fact that it's just being burned at crazy amounts. Um, and then, yeah, for the usage of the chain, I see a few use cases, but I don't see that many. And so I don't really know where incremental buyers come from over the next few years. I see where they come from. Like there will be a place for ETH, there will be a place for Ethereum in the space, and it'll be number two, I think, for a while. I don't see it going anywhere. Maybe it even goes to number one actually long term, but I just think for the next couple of years, I think the narrative is a little lost. I don't know. How do you feel?
So I think honestly, the important stuff on Ethereum, you can kind of list it on one hand, right?
Yeah,
So let's count them, right? First, you have borrow or borrow lend, right? Um, then you have swaps for fungible tokens, swaps for non-fungible tokens, and stablecoins.
yeah.
Did I miss anything? I think that's, and
No.
I don't know if we want to count oracles or not, right? I think you should count oracles because without oracles, you can't really have any of the borrow lend. Um,
Sure. But oracles are mostly an off-chain invention.
right, but the importance of them is right. If you wanted to have a borrow lend platform on Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin blockchain can't natively understand the commands that are being sent to it. Like it can't have that cross contract interaction. It can't
Mm,
know that the price of BTC is whatever, or BTC USDC is whatever. And so it's hard for you to. It's really hard actually to build out like a functional borrow lend market on Bitcoin.
mm.
If it's just being used as a data availability layer, right? Like you need some way of having things interact sort of more natively, right? And and this is the challenge with the data availability layer to begin with, right? Like by having all of the execution on Ethereum, you have guarantees, right? You're guaranteed that that contract is going to work the way that you expect it to.
Hmm.
And you have, better composability, right? Because everything knows how to speak to each other in the right set of bytecodes, right?
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's actually like a big obstacle is getting high quality oracles and having the ability to ingest their data, right? Otherwise, you basically have to
Interesting.
build in kind of like a master key into your borrow lend contract that allows for some admin to come in and, just by interacting with the borrow lend protocol and, say you issue Oracle transactions onto some borrow lend script that's written with Taproot, like you have to sort of allow for an arbitrary publishing of that thing, right? Or an arbitrary update to that script by a set of key players. It's just a lot more trust. Um, versus something like Chainlink, which has this Lindy effect, right? Like who's going to put their Bitcoin into a contract that someone else has the admin keys to?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so in terms of okay, so Barlin and swap, right? Like we don't have atomic swaps on Bitcoin right now. I think it might be possible using something like Lightning, like Relay, but at this point, it's a big outstanding technical challenge, right? Um, and with NFTs, it's the same thing. So what we've unlocked on Bitcoin is the ability to post data and then create over-the-counter markets to trade it, right?
Yeah.
And I broadly have this thesis that the primary use case for crypto is speculation and will remain
Mm-hmm.
speculation for at least the next 1 to 2 cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you want non-speculative use, you're totally right. Like, do you know what the number 2 chain is by TVL today?
BNB.
No. So you have Ethereum at 57%, and then next up is 12%, and that's Tron.
Ah, why is it's all Tether?
Yeah, it's all Tether, right? Like Tether
Yeah.
on Tron is like a form of economy in a lot of countries, right?
Yeah, it is.
Uh, So, you're right that like for scalable stuff like payments, right? I do think we wind up going with either layer twos or Lightning Network or Tron or alt chains, right? Um, but if you were to lock up some assets, right? Like say, okay, the first question is if you were to lock up versus Bitcoin, would you feel roughly the same level of security that they'll be there? Say you're hedged out in terms of price, right? Um,
Still a
and
little more Bitcoin, but yeah, sure, almost the same.
it's close, right? So so then the question is, okay, if you were to lock your assets into a DeFi protocol, right? Would you feel anywhere close to the same on a layer two or an alt layer one, like say Solana?
Versus ETH.
Yeah.
I mean, with Solana and ETH, I feel almost the same. I feel just about equal.
So if I asked you to lock up some assets and I said I would give you a 5% discount on the ones on Sol, would you take it if you
Yeah,
have to
sure.
hold it for 20 years?
20 years. 20 years depends how much of my net worth this is. But yeah, I would feel just about as comfortable.
Interesting. Because so when I look at like luxury goods or blue chip real estate or whatever, right? I think about like you're investing in that stuff for the very long term, right? If you buy
Yeah.
like a classic car or a really old bottle of wine or one bedroom in on Central Park West, right? You're doing
Hmm.
that to invest over the multi-decade horizon. So I think you have to kind of think
Yeah.
about it like that, right?
Yeah,
And
okay. Yeah.
for me, Ethereum and Bitcoin are the only options, right, for like long term value storage.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, so I think that's basically where the difference comes in, where it's like if I look at it on a multi-decade horizon, I basically only think about Bitcoin in that way. Um, where it's like if something is stored on Bitcoin, it's there forever. I don't have to think about it maybe for multiple decades. Yeah, I don't know exactly how long, but I'm very much certain. Um, with
yeah,
Ethereum, I don't feel quite as certain. Um, and the reason is that I mean, it's very much a software project, right? There are hard forks all of the time. Um, you might have a hard fork that in 10 years or 15 years doesn't support the ERC 721 standard. And doesn't support all the same assets that, whatever, the way that I don't know the way they stand now, right? So I don't know, like if you go, it's kind of like the coma thing, right? If you're in a coma of 15 years, like do you feel comfortable that your uh, crypto punk is still going to be a punk? Like the thing is, the punk maybe is the only asset that I would feel comfortable saying that crypto punk will be that's a true luxury good. Like they literally wrote the contract themselves. It's not an ERC 721. Like they created the contract before the 721 even standard even existed. Like that one maybe. Every single other NFT I feel zero level of comfort that it will stand the test of time for over 10 years. Um, Maybe something like an autoglyphs, which is literally tied to the blockchain, right? Like it's generated on chain, where if there are validators still running Ethereum at that point, the art will always be there. So yeah, those I think stand the test of time. Some of the original art blocks curated, I think those stand the test of time. Those are really demonstrating the art and the kind of, they're playing with the technology. So that kind of stuff, yeah, for sure. But like I don't know, everything else, it's like I don't know why would you put those assets on a chain that is subject to so much change, whereas with Bitcoin you know that it will always, literally always be there. Like it will not change. People will fight tooth and nail for it to not change.
Hmm. I guess the for the same reason though, right? Like I feel like ETH has already established a sort of Lindy effect, right? Where if you have high value NFTs or if you have a lot of money that you want to put into DeFi, if you're a quality protocol, you're deploying to ETH first, right? Like if you're gonna amass like TVL at scale and you know that, then you deploy to like Ondo Finance is probably the example that I would use. Those guys deployed and now there's like 100 million in TVL. That wouldn't have happened on any other chain, right? And it probably wouldn't happen on Bitcoin yet. And it's hard for me to see a world where like uh, at least for the next few years, Bitcoin manages to amass enough like TVL and like social agreement on contract standards and those sorts of things um, to allow for something like that to happen. So like one core thing is stablecoins, right? Like, do you think there's a world where Circle natively issues USDC, not natively, but issues USDC directly on Bitcoin as a BRC20?
Yes,
Interesting.
I see it happening. So here's the thing. Here's why I think that the DeFi thesis, right? Like for Ethereum, is I don't think like it really stands, because like we said with Tron, right? It's a distant second, but it's still second, right? Like it's like USDT. I think USDT is actually, there's more of it deployed on Tron than on Ethereum.
Hmm.
Obviously Tether is known to kind of like, go around the edges a little bit, but at the same time, it's like with assets like this and with asset like real world assets, I don't think people will necessarily care to put them on Ethereum. I think they'll care to put them on the one that is most suited for that specific application. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like, I really just don't see, like, I don't know what is one specific asset that you can really only feel comfortable putting on Ethereum right now. If you were to deploy any kind of asset, or if you were to do really anything on chain right now, what would you like? What would you kind of say, like, okay, only Ethereum is the one that makes sense for me right now?
Yeah, I think blue chip NFTs. I really do. I think you
Like,
know
what is a blue chip NFT in 2023? Like, what is that? Like, is it just another like 10K PFP? Like, what?
yeah, I think the 10K PFP format sticks around for at least one more cycle. Um, and I think like I don't know, like you can imagine like if luxury is the word that keeps coming to mind, right? So
Hmm.
if you have like a luxury brand that says that you can redeem your NFT for like I don't know, like a luxury like watch or something, or a handbag. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to happen on Ethereum, right? And it's just like first there's enough social consensus around it that like if you're one of these brands, you're going to go to like some consulting company that like does like web3 metaverse consulting, and they're going to be like, you should choose Ethereum, right? The expertise just isn't there with ordinals, at least today, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're a long way away from that. Last cycle what we saw was a huge amount of money being invested. You look at like MoonPay with like the apes, right? We saw a huge amount of money invested to onboard people into these luxury goods on Ethereum in particular. And one issue, right, is that like if you're on that chain and you want to sell your like expensive NFT, right? Like say you have an autoglyph, right? Like you can do the same thing with generative art on any EVM compatible chain, right? You can deploy the same
Yeah.
contract, you can have the same thing.
Yeah.
But a it's not the same because it doesn't have the provenance of Ethereum block space, which is why people pay a premium for it. And B, it doesn't have the liquidity on chain, right? Like Ethereum is the Manhattan of blockchains, right? Here's a question: if Ethereum is Manhattan, what's Bitcoin?
See, that I was about to say, I think Bitcoin is Manhattan. I think
Hmm.
I don't know, like it's like, see, personally, if I was going to put out a 10K PFP today, I would do it on Bitcoin. You look at the trading volume, the top trading NFT projects on Bitcoin right now are doing more volume than Bored Apes. And I know that ordinals are just having a moment, and it's just it's kind of a phase right now, but it's like, if you look at it, right? If you look at Lindy, like, why would you not put it on the oldest chain rather than, and like, what is it about Ethereum that you can't do? Like, if you deploy, right? If you have like a Bitcoin Frogs, which is the biggest collection, versus Bored Apes, like, what is it that the Bored Ape community exactly can do that the Bitcoin Frog community can't do now, right? Like, is it anything about the tech, or is it anything in particular about like Ethereum that separates? Like, why would you deploy on Ethereum?
Um, I think the reason is that like your customer base is larger, right? Because of the tooling that's been built out for Ethereum, right? And so if you're a potential buyer of say one Bitcoin Frog or one Bored Ape, right? Um, let's say you have it's a fair amount of money to invest even today. Um, let's say you're using a custodian, or you're using some kind of like so yeah, say you're using a custodian to get it done. You're using like Anchorage or something, right? The Anchorage
What?
might look at you and be
Who,
like,
bro? Who is using Anchorage to buy either a Bored Ape or a Bitcoin Frog? That's not a world we live in. But okay, okay, go ahead, go
um,
ahead.
well, so what I'm getting at is like the integrations are all there for Ethereum, right? Because it's a native thing, right? I think the nativeness of it
Like,
is meaningfully interesting,
what
right?
what integrations though? Like, you can buy a Bitcoin Frog on Magic Eden, and it's like one click. You just sign with your Unisat wallet. Like, it's just it's the exact same experience.
Yeah, but if you're investing that, like, if you're investing over 50K in one of these things, right? You're going to be looking at it like, fuck, what if the wallet standard changes, right? Like, what if, what if ordinals themselves change in best practices to make them more like gas efficient, right? Um, like the software end of it hasn't hardened yet, to the point where I think you can attract anyone other than like the early degens.
I don't know, dude. Like, I would say that was true if the numbers weren't the exact opposite. Like, if literally there wasn't already the more volume being done, and there wasn't already a larger holder base. Like, dude, there's more than 20,000 people, 20,000 wallets at least, holding OXBT, which is a token that launched like a week ago. And It took I don't know. There's like 4,000 Bored Ape holders. If you look at the whole Yuga ecosystem, it's probably like 12,000, maybe 15,000 at the very most. So it's like basically by every metric, like holders, volume, like all this stuff, these Bitcoin collections have gotten there in 2 months. And it's like, yeah, sure, maybe the standard hasn't hardened completely, but I don't know, like all the biggest collections from other chains have already moved to Bitcoin, right? Like Yuga did something, D-Gods did something, there's a Squiggles collection coming out. Like it's all like I don't all the standards are basically formalizing right now. All like you said, all the exchanges support it, right? So exchanges have started to support ordinals. Binance, which is the only exchange that matters, they have started to support ordinals, and they will do so for BRC20s in not too long. So it's like I don't know, these standards are already kind of formalizing. Like I don't really see a reason that you would go back.
Hmm. Um, can we zoom in a little bit on this like active user holder thing, right? Like, so I think like we've totally crossed the chasm, right? Okay, so if you think about a new chain, right, like Aptos, Aptos NFT season kind of came and went, right? Like they had their day in the sun. The top collection was the Aptos Flamingos, the Apto Mingos.
Hmm.
There are 10,000 like
Every
flamingos.
blockchain has that.
Yeah. If you look at Avalanche, right, they had their Avalanche party animals, which were actually kind of fun,
Yeah.
and then that died, right? Other than Ethereum, the only chain that has managed to cross the chasm toward like there is like clearly some value to PFP on this chain is Solana, right? I think I think part of that is just the fact that so many individual people have agreed that there is that like we've managed to sort of like suspend the disbelief and reach like common consensus that there is value to this, which is basically what crypto is, social consensus, right? Um, do you think like 20,000 wallets, right, overall for the ecosystem? That sounds like low, right? Like
Oh, it's
what do
super low.
you
That's not even the ecosystem. I mean, the ecosystem is much larger. That's like one token that was launched a week ago that was only whitelisted addresses. Uh,
hmm.
like that, it's that's literally just one token. But like a lot of the same stuff. Like we've already come to a point where we're talking about the only use case or like the biggest use case right now, or like things that you would do on Ethereum that you can't do on other chains are high value NFTs, like 10K PFP projects. And it's like even then, like I don't know, I personally wouldn't do it on Ethereum because if you are looking at it as like Lindy, then you would want it to be on Bitcoin. If you ask me, like the tooling isn't there yet. Sure, it will get there in a few months. Once Binance adopts it, like it's kind of over. Um, I don't know. I think that the one thing you can say is that in the future there will be smart contracting capabilities or just like stuff you can do with these assets that won't be possible on Bitcoin just because of the Turing completeness of Solidity and like what you can do on Ethereum. Um, I
So
saw a
you're basically
proposal where,
saying, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I saw a proposal where like the NFTs were smart contracts themselves, like EIP 6661 or something like that. I forget what it's called, but I'll have to look into it more. But basically, the idea is just that like with Ethereum, the reason you would deploy assets on that chain or you would do anything on that chain or like you would kind of like experiment on that chain is a bet on the tech, right? Like you bet on like the future of kind of just like innovation, right? And like these high value assets, you deploy them on this chain because the like changes that will be made to the technology, they will enable such innovation that the assets are worth that much more and whatever, maybe the underlying asset is worth that much more, what have you. That's kind of the bet there. But if you are taking that side, like if you are placing that bet, then I think that, like you said, Solana is the bet that you want to make, because like Solana is really constantly shipping. Like they are planning for a world of a billion users. I mean, they had an advantage in that they got to start way later. They got to see some of the, like,
Yeah,
mistakes that were made, and they kind of, I don't know. To me, they're in a decent spot.
yeah. I mean, I'm like also super bullish on Solana. Um, I think the paradigm of not fragmenting liquidity and having like one like monolithic chain that has like smart contract interoperability and stuff, I think is just like a really really big moat relative to any of the like layer twos or alt chains, right? I think Solana has managed to create a moat around itself. It's got real users, right? Phantom Wallet is largely to credit for that. It's just a great user interface. Phantom's coming to Ethereum and Polygon at some point, but it really managed to onboard people directly to Solana, which might not have happened otherwise, right? Um, so I think, but that's kind of the point, right? Is like the user experience on Ethereum is so much worse, and people are still down to use it, right? What happens when the user experience gets a little bit better through things like EIP 1559, right? So I think a lot about uh, a lot of people would say that like the end game for Ethereum is to serve as sort of like a layer that other chains interact with, right? That layer twos post data to. And a lot of people think that like individual users will shift primarily to layer twos. Um, I don't see it happening, right? I think like for anything large enough, you're just going to do it on Ethereum. It's where you have your
Yeah,
assets, where you leave your assets. You don't want to take on incremental technology risk or smart contract risk or hard forks or whatever, or legal risk, right? Of
yeah,
like bridging to a layer two, right?
yeah,
And the other thing is that like if you so say you buy an NFT on a like I've bought a lot of NFTs on a lot of stupid chains, right? I'm the proud holder of like 10 Solamas, which is like it was an early enough Solana NFT that I thought that was the bet. Um, so when I buy an NFT on ETH, right? I know that there are going to be people using it. I know that there's going to be liquidity that will take that over for me if I change my mind, right?
yeah.
And I think that like the question for me is really NFTs on Bitcoin versus Ethereum, and then DeFi on Solana versus Ethereum, right?
Hmm.
And what you're sort of saying is that like it doesn't make sense to do DeFi on Ethereum. It makes sense to do it on Sol, or on Tron or on Arbitrum or Optimism. Um, but I actually think that there's enough of a like network effect and enough just like social consensus that Ethereum is the chain where large movements happen. Where like if Pepe had launched on Arbitrum, it quickly reached a market cap that would have been like a significant percentage of Arbitrum's total TVL,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And so for speculation on fungible tokens, Bitcoin is the only other place where you can have something successful.
Yeah, so that's kind of my point, right? Is like Pepe, like what are the craziest, most like, I don't know, popular, like the things that really, really, really blew up on Ethereum, right? It's Pepe, Bored Apes, DeFi Summer a few years ago. You can do that now better on other chains. Um, at least the same, right? And I don't know, like why use Ethereum in that case? Like,
I think because it's
yeah,
sticky, right? So
yeah, but
if
is it?
you're,
I don't know. Like, if somebody like me, like I have biases towards Bitcoin, but it's like I have not bought a Bitcoin or any amount of Bitcoin in 3 years, and this whole movement happened, and I literally have not touched my ETH wallet since. Like in the last couple of months, ever since I sold my Pepe and I got into the Bitcoin ecosystem, I haven't touched ETH once.
I mean,
Um,
you're not the only person I know that's like this. I know like
yeah,
several
that's
dozen people that
That's what
like,
I mean.
yeah.
It's like
Um,
basically all the stuff that you really just wanted to do on ETH, right? You can now do it on Bitcoin. You can trade your JPEGs, you can trade your shitcoins on ETH. Like you said, speculation is the main use case. You can speculate on Bitcoin now. And it's the thing with Bitcoin is like it's Bitcoin. You know it's never going anywhere. Like with ETH, like whatever, you have to listen to the core developer calls, like and do all this stuff. And like no, it's Bitcoin. It's just Bitcoin. It's the simplest possible thing, right? It's beautiful in that way, right? You don't have to. And the thing that these standards proved is just how little was really going on in Ethereum and how much just bullshit there was. It's like if you can do so much and like basically accomplish the interesting things that were happening on Ethereum with just a few lines of JSON and like a numbering system of satoshis in the way to put arbitrary data there, like it's kind of a testament to first of all how genius that unlock was, but also like how little has actually happened on Ethereum. And then if you care about DeFi, right, if you like actually want to do DeFi, first of all, what are the assets that matter, right? Like the assets that really only matter, in my opinion, are Bitcoin and stable coins, right? Like those are the assets that have demand. No other asset has that much demand. Maybe you can say ETH has some demand, but maybe. Um,
yeah, I think we've gotten far enough into the world where I think you can safely count ETH as like a currency, the way that you're
okay.
counting Bitcoin
Let's
and USDC as a currency.
yeah, let's go ahead and say that. If really the demand is Bitcoin, USDC, and a little bit of ETH, like you can execute and you can execute all that on Solana, like way better than Ethereum. It's a way better experience. You have all this, you have order books, you have the liquidity in one place, you have all the stuff that people have been talking about forever. So I don't know. I just like if you look at all this stuff, I just don't see a reason. I personally, as a user, don't see a reason that I would go back to ETH. Uh, if I'm looking at like if I want to, yeah, I really I don't see a reason at all.
So okay, so here's where I present the bull case for Ethereum DeFi, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, is that like so far everything has a compromise, right? Like Ethereum's compromise is cost, and so we'll just set that out from the start. Uh, Solana's compromise is liveness, right? Like it's got
Mm-hmm.
downtime, and it's not immediately clear that like if I today had like I don't know a pension fund or something and I was running their money, I couldn't just put the USDC into the borrow lend protocol on Solana. I would be worried about it, right? And if I, as a money manager, want to make like a bet on some token and take a little leverage or something, I have to worry that Solana is going to go down and there's going to be some kind of market movement and I'm not going to be able to exit the trade. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Layer twos, there's still huge centralization risk, right?
Yeah.
So if it's kind of clear like I can't safely deploy there, right? And alt chains for all the same reasons. Like, would you feel comfortable deploying assets on Harmony? Like, no, right? Because like who the
Zero
fuck knows,
chance.
right? And everything else behind Harmony is a spectrum, right? There's Phantom, there's like Polygon, the POS one, there's Avalanche, right? And it's all systems of trust, right? And the whole point of this is that that like when you send a transaction, it settles the way that you expect it to, right? Once it's included
Mm-hmm.
in a block and finalized, it's there, right? Like that USDC is yours. And that position that you've opened or closed was opened or closed for you, right? It's like a trustless, like that things happen because that's how the protocol works.
Yeah.
Um, and so the only place I can say that about today is Ethereum, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I know that and look, you do pay a cost for it, right? And so it's not perfect, right? But everywhere that you don't have that high of a cost, you have a compromise. And you can lay out the future roadmap for all of these things till the cows come home. But today, Ethereum is the only place I can feel comfortable knowing that the thing that I want to happen will happen, and once it's settled, it's happened the way I expect it to. The chain's not going to go down. I can always submit a transaction, and I might have to pay a slightly higher gas fee, right? But and so look, like one end of the spectrum, you got Tron, right? Gas fees are minuscule, so for payments for whatever, like that's fantastic. And
Mm-hmm.
Solana as well, right? For 90% of the human population, Ethereum fees are just like would kill your net worth like immediately,
Yeah.
maybe more, right? 90% of the U.S. population at the very least, uh, and uh, and so, is Ethereum for every human out there? Definitely not, right? Um, but that's why I call it the luxury chain, right? It's like if you can afford to pay the gas fees, that gives you a set of guarantees that you can't get anywhere else. You're
Mm.
paying for quality.
Yeah. That okay, I will agree with you on that point. It is the only chain for high value DeFi. The way that Bitcoin is the only chain for high value, like just store of value, like any kind of
Yeah,
store of
for
value.
purchases, right? If you were getting paid for a house, you would want to get paid on
Yeah.
Bitcoin. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I would say ETH is the only chain for high value DeFi interactions. Like I would only feel safe taking out a loan against my assets on ETH for over like a year. Right? Like if I had like a 1 year loan, like I'm not even talking about 10 years. 10 years, zero chance. I'm going through like personally I'm gonna go through like a bank. But
yeah,
but 1 year, the only DeFi I would trust is Aave on ETH.
yeah. Or maybe Compound, right?
Yeah, maybe
Uh,
Compound on ETH.
so
Depends how many KYC tweets the CEO sends.
so here's the thing, right? Here's my anti-Bitcoin point on this front, right? The thing that gives me solace, the thing that allows me to sleep at night, having a loan outstanding on Aave on ETH, right, for a year, is that the contract and protocol and code works as I expect it to, right? And that's on the application layer, which is why we're saying Aave and Compound and not fucking like random like borrow protocol. Um,
Mhm.
but it's also so the application layer works as I expect it to. And once I send my transaction, I know that the app's going to function as it tells me it will. Um, but also at the protocol level, right? The bytecode is going to be interpreted by the global computer the way that I expect it to. And if I have the right to withdraw my assets, I know that I'm going to be able to withdraw them to a centralized exchange and get my fiat, right? Um, with Bitcoin, it's different, right? It is a social consensus on the like protocol, like digestion of it all, right? The way that the data is immutable and permanent and has all these beautiful guarantees the way that Bitcoin does. And I think that's really, really important, right? I totally understand why it's the hardest chain. Um, but the way that that data is interpreted and whether someone comes up with BRC 721A or BRC 2020E for like higher efficiency or whatever, and then like in a couple of days, like a circle announces that they're only going to support that, and you have to migrate your assets over the next 6 months, or else like you'll lose access or something. Like all of this stuff is just like way softer because the social consensus exists there, right? On Ethereum, the social consensus exists at sort of like the protocol level too, where it's like you have to trust the Ethereum Foundation and not even them, right? What you have to trust, who you have to trust, is the core developers and the people that sort of run validators to not like upgrade to a hard fork of the chain that like kills your access to your assets, right? Um,
Mm.
you have to trust broadly the whole community to continue to operate in a way that is like decentralized, but also like coordinated ish, right? Um,
Yeah.
with Bitcoin, your trust points, they hinge on like many more like individual decision making factors because the execution of the contracts is not built into the like native layer one.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. So I think I fully agree with you in that the way that I think luxury assets, like I think that luxury assets kind of like forever will live on Bitcoin now. Like maybe there's a few luxury assets that'll live on ETH because they were started on ETH, like the punks and the apes and the autoglyphs and some art blocks and things like that. But I think personally, I think that luxury assets now move to Bitcoin because there's no technological barrier like holding them back from being deployed on that chain and people valuing them as such. Like the hardness, I think will prove that out. But I do agree with you that luxury, like DeFi, as weird as that is to say, will only exist on ETH. Like the highest value loans, the highest value transaction swaps, that kind of stuff will eventually be settled on Ethereum because with Bitcoin, the smart contract functionality will never happen at the base layer.
Mhm.
And I mean never as in never.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's part of
and
the
like
point, right? Yeah.
that is the point. That is the whole point. And we can trust Stacks as much as we want, but Stacks is not Bitcoin, and uh, Aave on Ethereum is deployed at the base layer, and people will trust that. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, high end DeFi will happen, I think, on Ethereum, but I do think that there will be some kind of unlocks. Like I have talked to some Bitcoin developers who say that there can be DeFi done on Bitcoin using ordinals. So I guess like TBD on that. We'll see what happens there. But um, yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
it's interesting because I do think that like the one really clear use case is in high end NFTs, right?
Yeah.
That like that's definitely where Ethereum stands to lose market the most clearly. Um, but for luxury DeFi, yeah, it's like it's like the bet on Ethereum here is effectively the bet of like global like wealth inequality growing.
Mhm.
Um, right? You have like the rich getting richer. If you can't afford to use Ethereum, you don't get access to the best opportunities, right? If you couldn't afford to use Ethereum, you couldn't access Pepe. And for a while, people were like unable to access Pepe because they wanted to buy a couple $100 worth, and like the gas
Yeah.
fees would have eaten all their money, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think I think to a degree that just remains true.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you there. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next once the exchanges support BRC20s. If there's a whole new wave of meme coins in like 6 to 12 months that are all BRC20 based, I think there's a chance. I don't really know if it will happen, but there's a chance.
Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
I do think Binance listing is going to be like a huge unlock where
Yeah.
all of a sudden these are, for a lot of people, none of this is real until it hits Binance anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. The people in my life who are like into crypto and know about or excuse me, who are into crypto and don't know about BRC20s is very high.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's basically everybody. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But the interesting thing is everyone I know that got into it is fully in, right? Like I
yeah,
know
yeah.
very few people that know about BRC20s and Taproot and all this shenanigans that aren't fully in. Like everyone
Mm-hmm.
I know that was like into Pepe, into Milady, into whatever, the second they found out about this stuff, they went straight into it. And
Yeah,
yeah, I do think that's reflective of like, early adopter hobbyists, right?
yeah. It's definitely the beginning of something. I mean, I am curious how this all plays out, but you can't really underestimate the intensity of these Bitcoin people.
Yeah. um,
You
cool.
got anything else, Matt?
No, I think that was good. I think we pretty much covered the theses.
Yeah. Well, this was the Ethereum is officially dead episode. At least from my end. It's dead to me.
It's not the social consent. Deadly. Yes, I have abandoned Ethereum despite supporting it in the past.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah. Wait. I need to retweet that. Oh man. We'll be back in a few days or in a few weeks. Who knows with this stuff? No, we'll be back in a few days. We're back on our schedule. We'll be back in a few days talking about everything that happened this week. Have a good week, everybody. And until then, stay decent.
None of this was financial advice, legal advice, investment advice, or any other kind of advice. If you're looking for advice, you are definitely in the wrong place. Until next time, stay decent.